Salutations, dearest brothers and sisters. It is Timothy here with another episode of the Rediscover Human podcast. Thanks for joining me. Today's episode, well, it's that time of the year where it could get seasonal, and the true essence of the season. I sort of wanted to do an episode on my appreciation for Jesus. That was my intention like a month or so out. And though we will certainly talk about him in some aspects, where my head and my heart's been at is not fully in the place. Not that I do not appreciate him, of course, but to do an episode on that. So maybe, that could come around Easter or another time when we could celebrate him in a different aspect. But for now, it's happy solstice to those that are listening at this time of the year. It's the solstice, winter solstice just passed, or we're in the midst of those 3 days. And it always feels like heavy, compressed kind of energy, if you can call it that, this time. And that might just be where my own emotions are at. It might be, witnessing, I'm not, the amount of materialism, or just that it's that strange time of year where everything sort of stops and puts on hold for one purpose, and that's to celebrate Christmas in whichever way people choose to do that. And I don't know, it always just feels like a funny time of the year for me. But on the other side of it, I generally feel pretty optimistic, and so I'm just leaning into it. And I just thought I'd share my current perspective, especially this year of all years. Last year was probably intense as well, but it feels like this is the most intense this time of year has felt in my lifetime ever. So maybe you're feeling similarly too, with the just amount of polarity on the planet of perspectives right now. So I wanted to share my perspective on the current times, in that sense, on what is happening, what is taking place on Earth for many of us right now. And that essentially is a battle for our souls. We are in soul wars. Now I will begin. I'll just kind of 3 sections. I'll kind of zoom out and take a bigger picture from the beginning to now, and then maybe zoom into the timeline that we're in right now, 2021 going into 2022, and zoom in a bit more on the global timeline of 2022, 2021, and then zoom in a bit more to my personal experiences and lessons and how I'm handling it myself. And hopefully between those 3 perspectives we can, I don't know, you might just tickle your ears, or you might get some ideas or concepts that can help you to move forward with this heavy times right now. And so Soul Wars 1, as I've titled it, there is only really one from the beginning of time, from Adam and Eve up until now. It's not like, World War I or World War II, where you've got set periods. We've not come out of it. Now, in the beginning, God made the world, right? You may have different beliefs on that. That's what I believe. God created the world, the universe. How or why, I can't claim to know that. Don't really know who does at this stage. We could be just like a train set up in his study. God just, in his office, he's just got a little train set that's us. That's his little project. We could be a marble in an ocean of marbles that he's got in his giant pockets or something. Does God have a parent himself? Or, all these questions, they make me feel kind of this uncomfortable, strange, dull ache, a bit of confusion, a bit of anxiety and fear sort of in my soul. It's just a weird feeling, those questions when you ask yourself, well, if God made the world, who made God? And that weird feeling that kind of gives you. Well, yeah, they're not questions I'm not really ready to be answered right now. But essentially, I believe God made the world. So we'll focus on what we can glean within that. So it would appear as though we had at the time of our first parents, Adam and Eve, or Ammon and Aman, as I've heard them also called. and God gave them free will, which is a beautiful gift. And they chose for themselves to use their free will out of line with love, because everything that's in line with love is in line with God's will. And they chose to do something that was out of line with love, and that was essentially the first sin. And so being in a sixth sphere condition, or 6D, you could call it a six-dimensional state, as God created them in the natural human love state, optimum, maximum natural human love state. From this is, what makes sense to me from my research. They're in a six-dimensional state, and over time, after they chose that first with their free will to do that first thing that was unloving, and it may have just been something minor to do with a snake in an apple or something, but who can't. I'm not in a position myself to cast judgment on what it was necessarily, or why it was unloving, but essentially that's what seems like it happened. And over time since then, we've descended from 6D to 1D. Now, I don't know how long that took, but we're into this one-dimensional hellish state. And it would seem that we've kind of fluctuated over the last few centuries, or millennia, let's call it, as far as history that I can read, that I can trust, would dictate. We've kind of fluctuated between lower and upper 1D state. It's sort of hellish. We've been in worse times, and we've probably in Renaissance period it seemed like a better time potentially. From 13th, 14th century Florence type times up until 16th, 17th maybe, and then when music was quite different to what it is now. Anyway, so at some stage we're in this 6D, we drop to 1D, sixth sphere to first sphere. Jesus then came along with God's truth written in his heart, which I believe we may all access God's truth. It's written in all of our hearts as well, I believe, but it's how to access it, how to navigate to those truths. And so because Jesus had the potential to access these truths, and then upon his birth, God removed all the emotional injuries that he had received throughout from conception to birth process, which all of us, being around parents also in a less than 60 state, receive emotional injuries from our parents, projections and beliefs and all sorts from our parents as we're in the womb. From conception to birth, we all end up with these emotional injuries before we're even born. It would appear as though God decided to, with a flick of a switch or a mic drop type thing, undid Jesus' emotional injuries, and this would appear, it's been changed throughout time to be a virgin birth. There's a virgin in the sense of no emotional injuries. So it's how you want to define virgin, of course, in the sense that his parents didn't have sex. I do not believe that, but in the sense that there's a purity to his birth that no one else on earth had ever had, that led him to discover the things that he discovered, the truths that were within him, that's within all of us, that he was then able to share and teach. And that set wheels in motion for the next 2,000 years, that even the year we use as after the year of his birth. And there's 10,000 plus different versions of a religion claiming to follow in his teachings, and he's references to him in every other TV show I watch. There seems to be a theme of Jesus quite prevalent in it. The biggest celebration of the year is his birthday. Easter's also one of the biggest times of the year, seasonal times of the year, after a moment in his lifetime. So this one instance of God interacting in a this is purely my speculation. God interacts in the sense that he answers sincere prayers and things, but to interact in the sense that he'd adjusted a human's soul without that human soul desire. That's my speculation, but for Jesus to be born without those emotional injuries, that's quite a minor but a massive. The amount of the tidal waves that set in motion from that one little thing has been colossal. And that has been like kindling on the fire of lessons of love and peace and goodwill to all men that have been, trumpeted around the earth, but they're not. It's been like kindling on the fire, but it's starting to fade, or it's potentially starting to fade. And his central message and teachings I believe they're being deeply lost. If they were, I don't even know if you've really accessed them in this century, apart from through one source. Like, other than the channeled messages, like the Paget messages and other things, the only source that the true essence of his messages were really coming through from a long time were not necessarily religion. Religion has definitely elements of truth in it, but not missing some of the most fundamental lessons and teachings that I believe he teaches. So we had the Paget messages and certain books channeled through mediums, but we're so disconnected from mediumship and psychic abilities that, again, they couldn't take much of a foothold. Or people had to be really open-minded, especially within religions, to actually read these with open heart and recognize the truth that they contain. So it would appear as though he decided to come back just as things are heating up and the dark forces, it would appear, are really trying to clamp down and lock us into this material, somewhat fake reality. One of my theories is that all civilizations in the past have fallen. That's not my theory, that seems to be the truth. But my theory is that they recognize that, and they're like, how can we build a reality, a civilization that doesn't collapse? And that is the direction we're headed with the AI, with the automation of everything, with the metaverse, all of this, trying to build this matrix within a matrix, somewhat fake reality that we're headed in, a civilization where the elite can control things from, like the Wizard of Oz, completely from behind a curtain, and we all live in a matrix. And there does feel like there's a clamping down and a ramping up of the control in that sense, with the amount of information that they are controlling and fact-checking and restricting and taking down from all social medias, and to do with all the potential passports and data collection of every, where every location that you are, anytime any human is anywhere, they can track all this kind of stuff. And so just as we're heading into what feels like the potential to be a very dark time for humanity, of which the parameters are potentially being set up where there may be no direction out, where we're within a semi-invisible prison. Not to be fear-mongering, but that's just literally what it feels like to me, and possibly to many of us as well, what it seems to be happening. So Jesus decided to come back at this time as a humble Australian man who we may not recognize, for he's not flying in on a cloud or performing flashy miracles to prove who he is. We must recognize him simply by his teachings, by the word of God written in his heart, by experimenting with what he's sharing and experiencing in our own lives, the truth of what he offers us. And so that brings us up until now. And so at the end of this year, 2021, there appears to be three sides. I'm sure there's many sides within the sides, but broad stroke, three sides. There are those in charge who, nothing new under the sun, essentially, as has always been the case in most of history, a few elite controlling the masses, with the veil in between of the true intentions and what they appear to be, how they appear to be serving the masses and what they truly are doing. Corruption, manipulation, and control. And how they can maintain that control for forever, for their lineages. Then there's the interpretation of these actions to the other two sides. So there's those at the top of the pyramid, and then there's two opposing, almost opposing, which this is just how it appears to be, not what I'm saying it should be. There's the interpretation of these actions, of the control in charge. There are those who innocently and somewhat ignorantly side with those in charge and go along with everything that's being said. And there are those who boldly, but also fairly arrogantly, oppose those in charge. And I'd say you've probably got about 90 to 95% who are going along with everything and have full faith and given up their own sovereignty, in a sense, to those in charge and decision making. And then you've got 5 to 10% of those who recognise the corruption and are trying to, in their words, wake up the other 90-95%. And then you've got the 0.00001% at the top, and then you've maybe got the 0.1% that are working for them. And then you've got the rest of us, which are, those on the two sides of the fence, which has appeared at this time, which is, probably always there, but there's been one discussion that has been like a crowbar. They found that topic of discussion and they have fettered it and fueled it, and it's been like a crowbar between two sides, and it's highlighting which side of the fence who's on, and is probably in some ways helping those at the top to make some decisions that could be in the near future, but who knows? It's on us. This is just the surface game. It's not the real game. Well, it's what appears to be the battle that's happening, but not the most important battle. We have control of the most important battle. Anyway, you've got one side going along with it out of fear, a lack of knowledge about health, the ease of passing responsibility off to others. And you've got the other side going against it with a lot of anger at being controlled and told what to do, a lot of frustration at the others who don't see the things that they see, or to see the things the way they see it. Now, both sides of this, the fear side, who aren't allowing themselves to see the deceit and the corruption, and the angry side, who are fighting tooth and nail against the corruption. You've got ignorance and arrogance. Fear frozen on one side, and anger mobilized the other side to want to fight. Now, on both sides of this, have you got the law of attraction is at play for these people. Now, the law of attraction is not what is from divine truth teaching. It's not what you think you want, but it's what your soul wants for your progression. It's God's messenger of truth to each of us. So, on one side, the law of attraction is this appeared play for control, where many of us, and this obviously, if I have to be on the side, which I have been on, and I can't say that I'm not on, I'm definitely leaning on the side of the angry mob, and that's what I'm trying to work my way out of. But the law of attraction on our side is a fear of being controlled, of being manipulated, being lied to, that makes us want to kick and scream and throw a tantrum. And the other side is this denial, is this giving up control of health, which in some ways I feel like that the law of attraction isn't massively highlighted on that side yet, and that's the risk that we face in the future, is that when that kicks into play, because if I believe the law of attraction, it can be more subtle in the beginning. If you're observant, you'll notice it, and then over time, if you're not observant, the law of attraction gets bigger and bigger. And so for that side, I believe it may take some time till it ramps up, and then it could be a quite heavy, dark time, and that's when you don't recognize the deceit going on, and you don't recognize the signs and the red flags. The red flags are going to grow, and by the time that happens, a lot's going to be potentially lost, So one side needs bravery in order to face the fear and to see the reality that they're not allowing themselves to see. To wake up from the slumber that they have been in, the hypnosis that many people are under right now, this Stockholm syndrome that many of us have tried to wake people up to, and yet we have every intention of waking them up with love, and yet probably in most cases, even with the intention of love, it wasn't loving. I know in my case, I've tried many ways, and reflecting back, it has been a challenge for me to find a loving way to try to do this, to the point where it may not, even be my responsibility that I'm unsure of. So I try to focus on my role and what my law of attraction is bringing me. Anyway, so one side needs to be brave and face the reality that they may not be allowing themselves to see, and then feel what they feel once they recognize the deceit that they've been in denial of. Then on the other side, need some humility to feel the anger and the frustration and not to project it at others, not to fight, not to kick and scream and swear at policemen, at politicians, at arguing with family members, but to search to find the deep sadness that's the anger is covering up, or maybe even to express the anger, but in a contained, not necessarily contained, but not in a projected way, in just a way that the body is expressing the anger, beating up the bed, pillows, punch bag, without resistance, but without projection. And that's a unique place, a very childish tantrum place, but that may be what many of us need. Either way, both cases, it is waking up to the facade that we are in. The facade created to avoid the pain of the hurt that's below, that the law of attraction is trying to point to. The law of attraction is trying to show us our hurt, our unexpressed emotions from childhood that are still there, and yet the facade we have created to protect that hurt is blocking us from getting to the law of attraction, from blocking us from seeing the law of attraction and to healing what needs to be healed. So, my examples at this time, early on in this, lockdowns and what's been happening, I was very angry at what I witnessed. I got involved with a few projects that were giving talks at different marches around the UK. So I gave one in Birmingham, and David Icke was at that one. Many of you know David Icke, and he gave a talk. I was on a few people before him, and I got it recorded, or someone else recorded it, and I was able to crop it and put it on my YouTube. So some of you might have seen that talk, and I was quite angry. Not as angry as other people talking at these marches, but I was quite angry. And I was diving into divine truth a lot at the time, so I was trying to share what I was learning, but it was still all intellectual. And my talk showed that. And I got some feedback from some friends who were further into understanding divine truth than myself. And they were right about what they highlighted to me. And so since learning that and since going deeper into divine truth and really trying to reflect on what they teach and really try to own what is happening to me, what is my law of attraction in this, because it is a law of attraction that is could call it the collective consciousness's law of attraction, is what is happening in the world right now. We're all at a state where we're allowing this, and to be mad at the law of attraction for what it's bringing us when we have an opportunity to grow from it is more logical, but yet you have to have been taught that. You have to understand how the law of attraction works in the truest sense, and have the humility to try to own the scenario and the law of attraction that it's bringing to all of us, and to use it as a catalyst for growth and change, and to recognize that it had to get this bad for us to recognize what was happening and to grow. And it will keep ramping up until we recognize what it's doing and own it in a humble way. It will continue to get worse. And so that's kind of why I wanted to share my perspective of it. It's not a perfect perspective, but I don't see many other people sharing this perspective. So I felt that was why I want to talk about this right now. And so I've many nights throughout the last few years of a bit, tossing and turning before sleep, waking up early, and then, lying in bed for a few hours, tossing and turning again. Learning to recognize sometimes when I'm in anxiety and a lot of thoughts flying around in my head, and something I've got better at in the last few months, 1 or 2% better at, maybe 5% better at, is recognizing when these thoughts are flying in my head that anxiety is a cover-up for fear, and when they're anxious thoughts, to be able to sink into my heart space and allow the fear to rise, and sometimes my body will start to shake. And then sometimes shortly after that, I'll find myself waking up and it's been an hour and I've just actually had a deep sleep, and maybe throughout the night I was in a sympathetic state in my nervous system and didn't get much rest. And waking up after that 1 hour, after I just was able to, a small amount, but go from the anxiety to the fear, go from the facade to the hurt, that little bit, and my body was actually able to relax and get into parasympathetic state for that short time, and actually wake up and feel like I've just had the deepest nap, the deepest sleep. And the other one that is even more recent to me, that I've done before, but it's about revisiting this stuff, and it became much more apparent to me recently after I went for a walk with a church member the other day, because I wanted to try to express to him, and how I really soul searched about my motivations for this. But I wanted to talk with him about my reasons for going to church at the moment. In one of the reasons about going to is that I recognize this spiritual warfare that is happening right now. And, maybe this is still my facade, I don't know. But that there is a huge soul war going on. And I wanted to, because of what's going on, it's deepened my search and quest to connect with God. And church has been a great place for me to do that. I'm not Christian. I haven't told the church I'm not Christian, but at this stage, I don't think they mind. Maybe at some point in the future it may come up, and I'll cross that bridge then. But because of the spiritual warfare, and has made me turn to God more than ever, and the church is a great place to do so. I wanted to, and I can see how many of the members there have, in some ways, to put it biblically, almost breaking the first commandment. And people might think I'm just taking it too seriously or whatever, but the first commandment is about having no false idols or false prophets, false gods before God. There's one God. And there is this crowbar in society, this dividing opinion, in my eyes, has become a false God. Something many people have put their faith in, and they believe that they can break God's laws and put a needle in their arm, and that's going to protect them. And I think we need to be aware when something like this is happening, and that another biblical perspective was to building our house on the sand, when we put our faith into this needle. And that I just wanted to try to go for a walk and a talk with him and see where his perspective was with regards to where we get our source of information from and how much we should believe it. And he didn't seem to, wasn't totally against it, but again, he still wasn't that open to that being the case, and still very much, the phrase I can think of, it may be unloving, I don't mean it to be that way, but that's how it is Stockholm Syndrome, is what I witness with many of these people, is they really have full faith that they may not be perfect, these leaders, and this is why I believe they're chosen in a way, is that they just appear to be maybe a little buffoonish, but they're not insidious or dark. So therefore, they're doing the best with what they can, and that's really, the more angles you look at this whole thing from, the more that appears as though that's a great cover-up for something much more nefarious behind the scenes. And so these people don't necessarily wake up as much as if they had like a dark, ruthless leader. It's like it's clever hypnosis, really. It's it's clever and it's not clever, because for some of us it seems very obvious. But anyway, after this talk, and I wasn't able to, I tried to be in a heart space and loving and share, and it still didn't get through. You're lying in bed at night after these conversations and you're like, man, I should have just said this, and your head's spinning, you should have said this and that, and whatever. And inevitably, if they're not ready to hear it, they're not ready to hear it. And there's nothing I could have said probably at this stage there's no words that may have helped. Maybe it's, a longer play, but either way, your head spins and it says, well, I should have just said this. Oh, I should have responded when he said that. I should have said this. And this happened for a few days. It lessens each day, but essentially when the distractions of the day quiet and then my mind goes to that space, it gets to this place of frustration. And I've been telling myself often that there's sadness below this, that I'm trying to help people and trying to help children from the reality that we may be enabling for the future for our children is terrifying, and I'm very sad about this. But that I'm not able to really cry. I can sob a bit, but not able to really cry. Anyway, often I do this. I'll search for an emotion and divine truth. And I think I searched for hopeless and divine truth. And they were talking about hopeless, I think, and it even came up, I searched for it, and then in one of the videos I was watching, where they were talking with the author of one of the books I'm reading right now, Afra, about the Gates of Heaven book, which is really enjoying that right now. They even talked with him about, because he lived in early 20th century, I think, so like 1910 or around the turn of the century then, 100 or so years ago. And he was saying that the flavor of this time on earth right now is a lot of hopelessness, which is, I think they were saying, is unexpressed rage. So we feel hopeless, but really there's a lot of rage behind it, and it's this like stagnation of it, or unrecognition of it, or so this is the pitfalls and the traps that we fall into. I was like, well, my anger isn't helping when I'm projecting anger at these politicians and people that don't see what we see. That's not the solution. So therefore I don't express my anger, and I'm actually sad, which is behind the anger. But I wasn't expressing my anger, but without projecting it. This kind of middle ground, what I'm learning from my understanding of the divine truth teachings that have helped me in many ways, but it takes such practice and revisiting with each emotion, with each law of attraction to revisit, to really grasp it at a soul level, to understand it. And so when my head started spinning in this frustrated way, and I couldn't get to sadness, I actually just said, maybe I'm angry, maybe I've got rage, and then within no time felt this shake come up my spine and my fists clench, and like a child who locks their body in the middle of a tantrum and they squeeze and everything just shakes, and I could feel the anger within that. And then I was able to get out of my head and into the body, and able to sleep a lot better after that. And one day I actually went for a drive, because if I want to yell and I'm in a attached house, my neighbours could hear me. And it does make me resistant to expressing emotions fully like a child would. And so I sometimes take a drive to the countryside in the evening, and in my car pull over and just start yelling well, this is what I'd done before, and I'd forgotten about this, and you need to remember the techniques and revisit, and that's why our facade is so clever in the way that it will avoid the real emotion, or tell us that there's another emotion to stop feeling the pain that we have. And I'm still very early in the process, but just trying to share my own journey through it, because it may help you to recognize stuff with yourself. Because often when I hear something, Jesus talk about something else, I'll go, do I feel that? And just to see how that emotion, if that rises in me, if there's something there to that. And so after expressing this anger, which I thought I couldn't express because I was projecting it, but no, don't project it, express it. And the sadness wasn't coming, even though I thought I may be in my sadness. I wasn't actually. I don't think nothing was really changing when I was in my sadness. From expressing this anger, I was unable to sleep a lot better once again. So the anxiety, that was fear, able to get to that getting slightly better at that. And then the frustration and the head spinning or whatever, recognizing that's anger, has helped me to get out of the head. And so there's probably still much sadness that I'm not able to get to, but just not trying to avoid the anger first. And I just think that I probably have a lot more anger to work through before I'll get to the sadness, but that's the path for me right now. And that may be the path for many of us, is this, to say it one more time, expressing anger, but without projecting it. Like a child, may have had their lollipop taken off, but they're not trying to hit you for it back. They're just upset and frustrated. The tantrum based, where they're not attacking someone. That may be a path for all of us. And if that is the flavor of the times, this hopelessness that is masked rage, it could be useful for you if you're on that side. So whichever side you're on, and this is the main point I wanted to make, and if there's one takeaway to be aware of when watching what's happening in the world right now, and choosing your involvement within it, on both sides, on all three sides, but on both sides of what I've been talking about, you can worsen the condition of your soul. You can do more damage to the condition of your soul by taking no action and innocently going along or ignorantly going along with what is happening in the world, or by unloving action of projecting anger. Both sides, you can do damage to your soul and worsen the condition of your soul. So as a broad stroke, on those two perspectives, because this is something we need to be very aware of, the unloving action done to others is going to potentially, like I say, broad stroke, not definitively, but it's going to do more to worsen, or it could do more to worsen the condition of your soul than the non-action. Because you're using your will to then attack someone. If I've been at the protests where people are swearing at policemen, people swearing and holding placards, swearing at politicians, arguing with family members, friends that don't see it the way they see it. If you're projecting anger or rage at another human is coming from your soul to their soul, that's more unloving than the human that's just in a non-action, and therefore that can do more damage. Now, as I say, that's a broad stroke, because it depends on the level of the non-action and what's allowing to pass. But the non-action can be a sin of omission, and depending on the scale of what you're allowing through, the non-action, what you're allowing through would be the weight on the soul, and that's for God's laws to determine. But it seems that they're always just. So you can see how even on the side who believes with all their heart that they are right, what is right, what is righteous. See, the more self-righteous side, or the more angry side, you can easily fall into a dark trap and worsen your soul even further at this time when things are so triggering and the law of attraction is so heightened, and we're not humble or willing to own the emotions that's being brought to us, that's being brought up in us. We can fall into a trap and make ourselves worsen. And so the solution, as I've hinted and mentioned, is to, recognize this, to start to own our emotions a bit better, to process through what the law of attraction is bringing for us. And through breaking through the facade to the recognizing the hurt us, the real us, or the hurt child, getting to more of the true, real self below, we can step into more of our human and take more personal responsibility for life in the whole sense of life, more responsibility in every aspect, the way we were meant to be responsible for ourselves, have the ability to be responsible. So one side, we're taking greater responsibility for their personal health and the daily actions that keep health at bay. So the addictive habits and addictions, rather than simply blaming genetics or bad luck on ill health, or because someone breathed near you. Now, on the other side, taking responsibility in day-to-day life about how much interactions and dependency we have on the matrix. So how much we use supermarkets, high street shops, Amazon, social media, recognizing those addictions at play, the comfort of those things, and trying to find solutions in another direction that considers more than just our own ease of life within it. Buying from farm shops or Riverford, as I'm doing at the moment, is a better option than supermarkets if you can. Well, we should all be able to do that, really, but if you can, from independent stores and sites, rather than high street shops, Etsy and things like that are great. Growing our own vegetables, if you can, have an allotment, definitely a home garden and allotment is a huge step towards self-responsibility of a human being, I believe. Taking time off technology, recognizing when it's an addiction, when it's, how you open the app 10 times a day, or do you open the app, allow yourself one time opening or 2 times opening in the day, or, something like that, or even, 24 hours off it. Using less or no plastic, I've reused glass. I buy glass water bottles, very rarely do I buy them, but when I buy it, I've got 4 that I use, and I use my distiller, and I top up my glass water bottles, and I add a little bit of mineral salts, and that's it. No plastic bottles. This isn't not saying I'm perfect in every sense, but certainly between the Riverford order, which is all card or recycling, and I still end up in buying my avocados from Sainsbury's, because the Riverford don't do avocados. So, definitely steps to go, but they make me feel like I'm making a choice. And it's just about knowing the options and desiring and leaning in that direction. I eat these last 3 months is the most I've ever eaten whole food, and barely eaten anything in a wrapper that's processed. I have like 1 or 2 naked bars a week, and that's about it. The rest, everything else I eat is a whole food. pears, chestnuts and carrots are my snack. And then rice, potatoes, squash, pumpkins, peas, having Brussels sprouts this time of year, avocado, duck eggs. Just as an finding ways to eat more whole foods, and less. If you're opening a wrapper and it's processed, it's from the matrix. And if you're leaning on the matrix, then in a way you can't be upset that the matrix will do this back. Will push the line as long as they can push it until we stand up for ourselves. Not in the sense of stand up and fight back, in the sense of stand up and build the world where we're responsible humans. I'm sure there's many other suggestions that you guys can think of, but those are just some that came to my mind. And so giving up these comforts, these addictions, these daily habits that are also comforting to us, like that one chocolate bar you have a day, or I don't know, quitting sugar. If you ever try that, it's a battle. That is quitting dairy. If you have dairy every day and you try and stop, it's funny how if you don't have dairy, it's fine, and then when you have it for like a day, then the next day you're like, yeah, I'll just have a little bit of cheese. And that's one, porn for many people. Speaking with my friend the other day, and he's like, yeah, quit porn, believed it was completely gone, and then next minute you're back. And that's how it is, right? You try to use willpower to give up these addictions. How injuring yourself over training is another one. I won't injure myself. I'll listen to my body when I train. And then how often do we not listen to our body, get caught up in a class, in a game, in the gym, thinking people might be watching, or filming yourself and you've overtrained, pulled something. Or, beyond the physical, clearer stuff is the emotional addictions and expectations we have from other people to treat us a certain way, to not expecting someone to not cut you up in traffic. This is one for me is starting to recognize, really, even in driving. I'm not hugely road rage by any means, but it's still there. It's still something within me that reacts. It's still an emotion there. There's still me wanting to save every second when I'm driving. To overreacting to family members that don't agree. Again, something that's quite personal for me. I'm working through these things that you can have every intellectual intention of giving up, of not doing, I'm not going to react that way next time, I'm not going to do that ever again. I'm closing this window and I'm never going to open that website again. Every intention, and yet nothing changes, or it takes all the willpower in the world, and eventually, you're feeling a little bit weaker, a little bit down, and you're like, oh no, you justify it to yourself. You thought it was solved, and it was just waiting around the corner for your barriers to just drop just a little bit, and there it was, coming to trip you up again. Does that sound familiar? I've done that, so I've battled that and lost that battle many times. And I've done, deep, like the 35-day water fast was exactly that. No, if I just willpower this for long enough, eventually it will fade from my desire, and I will not, and it won't haunt me anymore. All great intellectually and with the intention, and yet it doesn't work. And it's through realizing, after enough times being stumped, there's something else at play here. There's another reason that someone else. Why doesn't someone else have this thirst for this thing? Why doesn't someone else crave to eat as much as I want to eat, or, whatever it is, have that sexual desire? What is it? Because is it just the personality? No. These addictions that we can't control, that's different for each of us, are the result of emotional injuries or soul-based injuries. You can't intellectual your way to heal that. Each addiction that we have covers up an emotion that you don't want to feel. And that can be physical addiction or interaction with another human, in conversation, a way we want to always make everyone feel comforted in every time we talk to them, and sometimes we do that at the sacrifice of truth, for making someone, we don't agree with something they say, but we don't want to be argumentative, so therefore we don't speak the truth as we see it. There's many examples within that, but we have addictions to the way we interact with other humans, which cover up emotions that we don't want to feel. We don't want to feel that they might judge us for not believing that or something. And the desire will remain as our will. That's why we have to use willpower, because our will is in the direction of the thing that is unloving to others or to ourselves. And we have to use willpower, and you can't win it by fighting it. You have to face the emotion that it's covering up. Remove the addiction. The emotion is there. If you can face it and process it, then you can begin to grow and begin to heal at the soul level. For the loving thing that you should be doing to become effortless and to become will rather than willpower, this appears to be the path, the way. This is what divine truth teach. This is why for those who hear me going on about it and haven't checked it out, this is why I go on about it so much, because if you are frustrated with trying to willpower your way out of addictions and negative habits on your life with all the intention and it not working, this is the path. This is, from everything I've tried and experimented with, this is the solution. This is what Jesus and Mary taught and continue to teach. This is why I'm sharing it. Like I say, for those who've heard me talk about it, for those that are already into it, then, I'm preaching to the choir, and I'm sure you understand it as well, or are down. Don't mind me going on about it as much, but for those, this is why I go on about it so much, because it is the alpha and omega of spiritual teachings. It's once you are on that path and you start to understand that, there's all the other teachings aren't as valuable or potent, even close. A lot of them can actually lead you in the wrong direction and lead you more into facade and further from the hurt child. That is the path to your true self. It's helped me to understand more about myself than anything else by, so much. So I don't want to give it a number because it won't do it justice. It's helped me to recognize what is happening in my life and how to navigate it. It's helped me to recognize what's happening in the world today and how to navigate it without doing further damage and dragging my own soul down with it. Because that's what it seems there may be, a big power play right now that could potentially bring everyone down on both, like I say, on both sides, and not to mention the elites, the direction that they are headed in. God rest, their souls. The amount of damage they're doing with the weight of the impact of the amount of souls that they're negatively impacting with some of their decisions. So it seems there seems to be a big power play to bring everyone's soul down. And that's supposedly what many of the earthbound spirits' goal, the negative, evil, nefarious earthbound spirits, which were once humans that are remaining on earth to influence negatively, literally want to make bring everyone else down to the hell that they live in, through bringing everyone else's soul condition down to their level, through influencing the behaviors of the global elite. Then the global elite trigger us, and then when we're triggered, we feel justified in our rage with the other spirits, influences around us to make us feel justified, to whisper in our ear, yeah, you have a right to be angry at them, to fuel that injury that's already there, that they're able to tap into. That if you can get to the root of that injury, that emotional injury in your soul, and release it, then no longer can these negative spirits influence us and whisper in our ear, in our inner ear, to push us to do these things. So on both sides, on all three sides, in all humans, we have bought in on materiality for the sake of fighting for our mortal for our mortal bodies. We may, and many of us are, damaging our potentially immortal souls and moving ourselves further from our potential, from truth, from love, from God, the Most High, from Source, however you like to word him. It takes real humility not to do this, not to sacrifice our souls for the sake of the very physical material in front of us. And that's why Gandhi stood out. That's why Jesus has had the impact he has had, because in the face of every reason to be angry and self-righteous and to want to unlovingly correct others and control and lead and guide, and he understood, overstood and understood, not just intellectually, but at a soul level, that only forgiveness and love would triumph and end the eye for an eye, the good versus evil, and the dualistic battle that is taking place, that is the battle in the macro and the micro. He understood that. He understood it at the soul level, not just intellectually, and that's what made the difference when the push come to shove. He could still forgive the very men that were hanging him on a stake, hammering nails into his hands, because it was at that level. And the only way to get for us humans to follow that path is what he teaches, the techniques to do it, which I imagine he taught in the first century, which I believe were removed, stripped from the Bible by many men along the way who didn't understand the emotional teachings, didn't value them, maybe didn't want them shared. That is what I believe was lost, and why Christianity hasn't had the impact it could have had they actually taught what Jesus may have taught, which is why he may have had to return, because he's like, guys, we're missing some fundamental parts of this. At the soul level is all about the emotions, how we're all carrying these emotional injuries from childhood traumas that we're in our facade not able to access or acknowledge. How do we get to them? How do we release them? How do we heal? How do we follow that path to divinity? To be like Christ. So we can learn it in this life or in the next. And the more we can develop in love here before the veil of separation appears, the more we can help the future Earth, the children of Earth. Because everything I'm hearing, and quite clearly, it's a lot harder to assist us from the other side, from the spirit world, than if it would be if a few of us here were to wake up. Now, I don't just mean wake up intellectually like millions of people are and claim to be in this red pill, woke up to the matrix. That's a step in the right direction, but nothing really changes in the world until we make the soul-based changes. No one else is really teaching how to do that anywhere near as precise or defined or as accurately as Divine Truth teaches this stuff. So I just want to say thank you to God for creating and sending Jesus. Thank you to Jesus and Mary for coming, and thanks for returning, and for all that entails to be in heaven and then to choose to come back into this reality, temporarily giving up paradise to help us, knowing the ridicule and attack they would be subjected to for simply trying to teach about love. Now, I mentioned this in the previous video on my YouTube, that this is the most important thing, or the only thing that we need to do on earth, the kindergarten of earth, in the school of eternity, is to learn to love. And the only place to get that education, or the most precise place to get that education in love, is from the Divine Truth Teachings. And I'll share the playlist and the link. I shared it in the previous video. I'll share it again to where to start that. The Education in Love series. Phenomenal teachings. If you can apply it, that is what I believe, how we make the change that needs to happen on earth for the shift that can go either way right now. To help our souls, help other souls, to help the planet, help the children of the future. It's about taking responsibility, real responsibility, not just being angry at the leaders and telling them to change when we have the opportunity and the power and the balls in our court. God made a universe that's so loving that even in the face of this, we can still save our souls and grow. Even if, like I said before, even if we're sat in a prison somewhere, you can still improve, you can diminish, or you can improve your soul condition from anywhere if you're in a sober mind. And that's what's loving here. The game behind the game of life. The lessons. And so they came back to teach about love in the face of all that they've had to face. All for the love of humanity. That is unparalleled strength and courage I've seen by any of the humans. So Godspeed to you, beautiful soul, and thank you. Amen.